in general, clients don't immediately go, oh, great, yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
And neither did I as a client when my therapist, actually, I'll tell you about, to illustrate kind of, how much of initially a block this was for me. So I was judging my 12 or 13-year-old self for being who I was, simply for being too tall, too gangly, too nerdy, too spiel that I give is always much the same. This is how I work. This is what you can expect. Speak about confidentiality, child protection, all this kind of stuff. But I'll always say, and I work too with...
This is a second episode with counsellor and psychotherapist Neil O'Connor. Neil, hello and welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. Last time we left off with your story finishing with the graduation. Mm-hmm. Or with finishing the bachelor degree. And you were thinking about setting up your own practice. Mm. So what happened then?
I suppose, I had a very busy time at the end. Actually busy and not busy, because it was just as COVID lockdowns hit.
Yeah.
So you were busy, and then all of a sudden stuck at home. But I was working on my thesis, so that kind of busyness carried into that, and I was able to dedicate a lot of time to that. And then coming out of that then and, going back to working with clients face to face and building up all that momentum and, this kind of thing. I think I had I never particularly found it, what am I going to do? Or, there always seemed to be something happening. That busyness was there, So I was lucky that way. And what I say, I enjoyed most of it, I'm going to say. You know what I mean? I enjoyed that kind of like just the build up and the way that things organically happened for me. And come back to sort of in our first episode talking about that this was what I felt intuitively I would do and I should do. It sort of felt this is working for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, not in a mystical way or anything like that, but just, it did. It went along, and I kind of, came out of the degree and into this move to working full time in a nice way. Do you know? No, I don't think everyone has that experience. Not everyone, people can have a slow burn at the start, but it was a nice time of my life, a nice kind of, a change into something that was really, oh, this is who I am.
So it felt somehow you identify with that this is who I am.
Yeah. There was a sense of that the completeness of the course and the maturity of the learning and the evolution of me all coming together.
Did you know at that time how your practice is going to look, what you're going to do, how you're going to do stuff? Did you have an idea of like, I want to have my office here, I want it to look like this?
I think I did know. You learn, as you go along, and each placement that you have, you learn a lot. You also learn how not to do things or what you're not going to do.
Yeah.
So, in plenty of placements and plenty of therapists will have a 50-minute hour and 10-minute break, next client. 50-minute hour, 10-minute break, next client. And that's fine. But I knew for myself, that's not my internal model for working. So I do a full hour, 60 minutes, give myself 15 to 30 minutes in between, and then invite in the next client, So just even practical scheduling, things like that, you kind of go, that's how I'll do it. That's how I'll do it, And as you build up those ideas of how you will present yourself to these clients as a therapist. Now, at the moment, I'm renting rooms in Dublin, so there's only so much I can do in terms of, customizing that to me or decorating, furnishing, etc., etc. But I definitely have that future plan of this is what my space will be. Do you know? And I think really it'll, like my own home, it'll reflect something of me and my values. And you could go into a kind of a, quite detailed level of things about textures and visually how it looks,
Colours.
how it feels, colors, the sense of being in the space, the sense of being in the chair, the sense of distance between two people, etc., and all those kind of things. And I think I have a nice feel for all of that. Do you know what my space will be? But yeah, it's a lovely. You and I in preparing for this, had talked about how each therapist is different, and each therapist can be. The analogy that we shared was something like that. It'd be like going to an artist to customize to custom order. Pardon me, a painting or a piece, a sculpture. You're going to get something different from each person you approach. So each therapist is individual. And, too, for people who are looking for a therapist, a good therapist, the right therapist for them, etc. Keep looking. Do a session or two if your gut's telling you this isn't it. And, that's, I say that with an awareness of you're paying for each session and all those kinds of things. But equally, too, once you find the right person, you'll be paying for those sessions. You'll be going each week. You'll be investing in yourself in that way. So, it's very important. You wouldn't go to a hairdresser or an artist and go, here, will you do this? And then if you're not happy, you wouldn't be going back again the next time going, great, do that again. Find the therapist that you want. You don't have to do therapy your way or my way or his way or her way. Keep going, and you'll find them. And I've often said to my clients, there is that belief out there that, and you're told this in your training, the right clients for you will find you, kind of a thing. And, when you hear that the first time, you're like, it's a bit like a horoscope or something, but it's true because the ones who stay with you, I think it's probably truer to say that the ones who stay with you somewhat naturally are the right clients for you. So intuitively, they will connect with you. They will stay with you. They will work with you and you'll work well with them. And you'll look forward to them coming in and they'll look forward to being there.
Yeah.
And, so in that way, yes, the right client. It's probably truer to say the right client will stay with you. Because they have to find you and get to know you first. They may be the wrong client and then off they go.
What would you be looking for a therapist if you went look for one? And probably that would be different than like maybe regular people who are not therapists would be looking for.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Knowledge.
I'll answer your question in a kind of a roundabout way, right? Just to be difficult. But the answer really is the two therapists that I have had so far with whom I worked the best, had the most healing, had the most, felt facilitated, felt heard and held and, all those kind of things. On paper, were not what I myself would go out to look for.
So on paper, they maybe didn't put it out on the paper or they didn't have it on the paper?
So what I mean is, if I think to myself, what would my ideal therapist be? And if I only followed that, I wouldn't have found these people.
I see.
These two particular women. If I stuck rigidly to my idea, no, I want someone this, blah, 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 blah. It's a little like any relationship, really, I think. If you go in with a lot of, they must be whatever.
Yeah.
Tall, blonde, rich, whatever. Drive this car. You're doomed. You're not going to find anything meaningful. So now, I suppose, to answer your question, I would look for that connection and look beyond the, initial presentation judgment piece that they give and that I bring. So, I don't think they're right for me because they're too whatever.
Yeah.
Too young, too old, too whatever. And then if you look for the connection, it's almost like if you do this, and go, what's the counselling session like? You know.
So what do you feel other than kind of
Precisely.
the expectations and
How they
what
make you
should be?
feel. How they make you feel, yeah.
And you said the word relationship.
Yeah.
Right? You're looking for a relationship. I can imagine that there's somebody out there right now listening to us being like, a relationship? I'm going for therapy. I'm not going for a relationship. How would you answer that?
I would say, you're right. You are going for therapy. And you're not going for a relationship. But only one definition of that word. There is a relationship there. If there isn't, there's no therapy.
Yeah.
It is not a romantic relationship, a sexual relationship, a friend relationship. It's a therapeutic relationship, which is a particular kind.
I think it's a very special relationship.
Very, very
that
special.
You don't really experience until you are in a therapy with a maybe well-suitable therapist.
100%. Do you know? And you'll notice that not necessarily in, you know, oh, my therapist is great because they have a lot of different degrees on the wall. You'll notice that with, so in our first episode, I talked about transference and countertransference. And my own transference as a client that I experience, and almost like, again, a signal that tells me this is the right therapist for me. My own one is, and it just so happens that both of those women saw me as a client in their own home. So I have this transference response of, I would love to buy this house and live in it.
Wow.
This really strong feeling that, God, I'd love to say to them, if you ever sell your house, let me know. And because it's happened more than once, there is a pattern there, you know, and there is something that, you know, and it's about how I'm made to feel in that room, in that chair, in that house, in that space.
What was it? What was it creating that feeling in you? Was it the decor? Was it...
No, it's going to be, so we go back to that word again.
Yeah.
Relationship. So the therapeutic relationship. Because ideally too, and I think this is an important distinction between a therapeutic relationship and romantic or friend or whatever it might be, family. Generally speaking, if those relationships are working well and are successful, they are balanced and they are two-sided.
Tell me more.
Meet in the middle, you and me and my partner, me and my mother or whatever, two people. Mm-hmm. With a therapist, there are absolutely two people, but the therapist knows more about the client than the client knows about the therapist. Mm-hmm. So it's not that equal relationship.
Or maybe it feels like it is an equal...
It absolutely can, and kind of ought to feel, you know, close and intimate. It's not to say that the therapist holds back and go, well, I'm not going to tell you, you tell me, but I'm not going to tell you, know, it's nothing like that. It's a boundary piece, a professional piece where the right therapist for you will be able to hold all of this stuff for you. But it's your hour.
Yeah.
It's your time, your space. Clients will sometimes come into the room and try to give you the same thing.
Yeah.
Try to attend to you. How have you been? But you tell me about you. Like, tell me. And while that's lovely, you can accept that as the kindness that it is or can be. You equally have to understand that you're taking that and offering it back to this person professionally, boundaried, and saying, thank you, but this is your time. If it keeps happening, I think anyone who's in training will know, you know, if that keeps happening, you go, I've noticed this now. This is a thing that I've noticed.
That's the sentence.
You know,
I've noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah. You put on a table being like, there's something between us.
Precisely. Yeah.
Can we explore it?
Generally speaking, I think though, if people will come, you know, clients will come in and go, how are you? And eventually when you just keep going, let's, you know, I'm going to bring that back to you and just says, you know, kind of see what's going on for you at the moment. Consciously or unconsciously, they'll eventually realize he does that and asks me because I'm worth asking. And I don't have to look after him.
Yeah.
I'm being looked after. Do you know?
That's why it's not that friendship where
family,
if you just
partner.
keep saying to your friend how you are, or you're looking after them, you know, oh, how's your mom again? She's in hospital, but they never ask back. That's something else. But in therapy, you can't apply the same thinking.
And how many times have we come across a client who, after a while, starts coming into the session saying, you know, I have this friend, right? And they never ask me how I'm doing. Because all of a sudden there's this new experience of being asked how they are and being listened to, being attended to. Someone asking the question and genuinely looking at them in the eye and waiting for the response. And when that's a new experience and they go back out into the world and someone's like, oh my God, my dog did this and I dropped a cake. And you're just like, you haven't asked me one question about myself. Yeah. You know, so there can be a both lovely and also a little disturbing for clients when they shift out of a groove that they've been in for so long and they're doing all this work in therapy and they're changing, and then the people in their life are like, oh, I don't like that. Yeah. You know, I'm doing this with my fist because I'll often do that with clients to show this change, this disharmony that all of a sudden happens. And for them to understand, keep at it.
Yeah.
Don't you relent. Don't you go, oh, but you know, I must go back to how I was. Keep going. Do you know what I mean?
And it happens with their parents, their
partner,
children,
husband, wife,
working relationships,
sister, brother, with themselves in many ways. Do you know what I mean? They start to change and go, why am I so tough on myself? Why am I so critical of myself? I've noticed the language I use when I talk about myself, because if I notice it and I bring it to their attention, and I say, the way you've just spoken about yourself, or the way you have been speaking about yourself, it's hard to listen to. It's hard. It's hurting to listen to. And
it's hurting you as the external person in that relationship.
Know, and they kind of go, oh, and reflect on that, you know, and then they hear it,
and then they hopefully change something internally with themselves.
We hear it. We point it out. They hear it. And the next stage, often, at least with the way that I work, is I'll say, whose voice is that? Because and they'll always say, inevitably, it's mine. It's my internal voice. That's the way I talk to myself. And you say, yeah, absolutely, you're not wrong. But it came from somewhere or someone outside of you. So how old does it make you feel? Who does it sound like? Say it to me. And then they'll do something, or they'll make, they go, oh, you're so, they'll do this kind of thing and go, oh, you're so stupid. You're so, why are you always dropping things? And then they go, oh my God, that's my mother. Because they've made her face, or they've done her voice, or they've whatever, so there's a piece then about, wow, I can now separate that voice out and I can hear it amongst all the babble and go, I don't need that. Yeah. I can jettison that. What a lovely thing to be able to do for someone.
Yeah.
Do you know?
After a while, maybe decades, most of the time, decades
absolutely.
of this voice being internalized.
100%. And then being so familiar with it. Do you know? So used to it, so familiar with it, that it becomes, but it must be my internal. And it is their internal monologue, their self-talk. But it becomes so internalized and so naturalized to them that they cannot any longer say, oh, that's where I got that from.
They can't distinguish.
So you do this piece of work about loosening it and pulling it away.
What do you find clients most commonly bring?
I think that, after a while, it sort of begins to inform itself. And what I mean by that is that when you begin and you have your first ever client, you don't set out to say, well, with my first ever client, I'd like to deal with anxiety and anger, please, So it comes in the door. And for whatever reason, I found that with more hours building up, and you'll see a pattern and themes, and it'll take shape. It begins to take shape. And the shape mine took was that I work best with an older client cohort, middle-aged, maybe my own age and up, or, kind of late 30s and upwards. A lot of historical abuse, a lot of relationship stuff, family stuff.
And family stuff, like what?
I suppose to again paint very, very broadly, family dysfunction, family where it is in some way a shock to or a disruption to what a family ought to be for that client.
Mm-hmm.
Now that can take the shape of, as I say, abuse. It can take the shape of neglect. Generally speaking, it'll be where a problem has arisen or where a relationship is fractured. A family has been pulled apart by something in some way. Do you know?
And they probably lived with that. With the
Absolutely.
unresolved trauma or whatever.
Absolutely. And it informs their other relationships, romantic, friendship, work, relationship with themselves, So when you, and often, they'll come in with, I just can't get on with my boss. My boss always gives me such a hard time. And after a particular period, and they begin to trust you and you are able to do this deeper work, it is a relationship in the now that is a reminder or an echo of one from the past. And the client themselves, unconsciously, unknowingly, is bringing that into
their present,
the here and now.
Yeah.
And in my, when I sit down first, and this is a stranger to me, my little spiel that I give is always much the same. This is how I work. This is what you can expect. Speak about confidentiality, child protection, all this kind of stuff. But I'll always say, and I work too with little you, and I do this with my hand to show roughly a 3-4-year-old, little you, to see what you needed then and what you wanted, and how that shapes who you are now.
How would they react to it? That's the first time, first session. Let's say people who never had therapy.
Yep.
They come and see you, you do your spiel, and you end up with, well, I'm going to work with little you here.
Now, I just, I want to be kind of clear too in that what else, I think it is important. I think it bears just staying with this for a moment. I will say something along the lines of, I usually look at, or I'll normally do a bit of work on little you. So I would never say verbatim, we are going to do this.
Okay.
This kind of like very directive, very, if you want to be here or else get out,
right,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, even with that, even with being gentle with it and going, like, this is what I normally do. And it is important. And kind of, some clients will be like, great. Yeah. Like, I know that there's something, kind of a thing. Some clients will be like, one in particular, when I said that, just went, oh no. And just, and kind of was already answering and doing that before they realized what they were doing, that kind of way. And later in the work, much later, we would remind ourselves of that, and kind of, we were able then to kind of go, look how far you've come, like, and kind of giggle about it a bit, because it was so immediate, so reactionary, and so unconscious for that client.
And so honest.
And so honest, precisely. So authentically them, they were like, oh, no,
Yeah.
But equally with that, I didn't then go, oh, okay, no, we won't then. Nor did I go, yeah, we will. So I just kind of went, oh, okay. And then kind of moved on and didn't force it, didn't relent. I find it difficult to do something that's very meaningful, very healing without doing that. I mean, you're talking about, the first, from birth to 3, birth to 1.5 years, 2 years before language develops, so much is happening.
Yeah.
So much is being taken in and built up and built upon. And in the way that this happened to me, and I learned about this, you know, through my own work, is that the way that we'll often, as we speak about something that's very emotionally demanding for us, we'll run out of words to say. And there's expressions like, I couldn't even find the words to say how I felt. Yeah. I just couldn't
describe what was happening to me, how I felt.
Precisely. And there's a very good reason for that, which is that in that first period, when there's so much happening around you, none of which you have control over, and you're experiencing so many emotions and being cared for and attended to or not, being comforted, fed, cleaned or not, and you don't have any language, but you're still feeling all that stuff. You're still feeling, this is good, I'm being looked after. This is bad, I'm hungry, and I'm not being picked up. Not in that formal way. You're not, as I say, it's before language, but you feel that. And then by the time your language development kicks in, you have felt and experienced a lot of stuff, but have no words to match to it. So every time we describe our feelings, we're retrofitting them to something. So then when we get to that point and we're being reminded of something like rejection, abandonment, being dismissed, being being laughed at, being humiliated, being shamed, it goes right back and we lose not all the language, but a lot of it. And we're just left speechless. Quite literally.
In a shock.
Left speechless.
Yeah.
Do you know, and kind of, for me, I think when I realized that, and then when you can pass that on to clients as a piece of like a psychoeducation, like look what you're feeling, and your inability to describe this is part of the human condition. You're not failing at therapy. You're not a disaster. You're not worth humiliating or laughed at. You're actually human. And this is, we can't avoid this thing that we're experiencing right now, but we can be compassionate to it.
Yeah.
We can hold it and love it, you know.
What's your experience now, like describing it to somebody who maybe isn't sure if it's for them, maybe isn't sure if there is something in my childhood to be looking at in the first place?
People do say that, or they will say, oh, you know, my childhood was good. And they're right. They're not lying, or they're not even denying themselves something, or nor are they unaware, and they go, oh, I remember now, it was awful, you know, the family car went off a cliff or whatever. They're not, you know, there's no self-denial going on there. They actually did have a good childhood. But even within that, we cannot escape something that is difficult or something that will inform where we are. And nobody comes to therapy and goes, I just want to talk about how great my life is. And, you know, like, God, all my relationships are wonderful. Or if they do, after a while that stops, and then, you know, the real thing will come out. But there's always going to be something. And generally speaking, by the time someone has accepted and wishes to come to therapy, they'll know that there is something. And absolutely, they might not know what that thing is. But sure, isn't that our job? That's part of our job, is to guide them through it. And like I said in the first episode, this idea of, or did I say this, or were we talking just beforehand? When you begin upon the path reveals itself. Yeah. You don't need to come in and say, I know what the thing in my childhood is. Let's talk about that. You're allowed to come in and say, I don't know what it is, but I don't know why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, but I want to know.
Yeah. And I want to change it.
When we go to the doctor, when we go to the GP, do we say, I have a pain here. This is exactly what it is. I need this medicine. Yeah. If you could just write the prescription. What I'll do then, I'll get physio after that. You don't do that. You just go, well, please help me. Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully you will be able to help me figure it out. And we offer that and say, with compassion, with patience and kindness, we say, yeah, let's see. I'm here with you.
Yeah.
You know.
So when your clients go through this process with you, how would they react, or how does it look going through it? Like what's happening?
You know, I could nearly answer each question that you're asking with, it's individual to every client. And it absolutely is. But let's kind of talk in generalizations, you know, or at least what I've found and what I've experienced, you know. You do, I think in the main, in general, clients don't immediately go, oh, great, yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
And neither did I as a client when my therapist, actually, I'll tell you about, to illustrate kind of, you know, how much of initially a block this was for me. So growing up in Sligo, in a nutshell, there was a neighbour or someone up the road whose son, now I was in my late 20s, early 30s, at this stage. And their son was 11, 12. But he looked almost exactly like I did when I was 11 or 12. And I could not tolerate looking at him.
And was the resemblance, was that also for you when you were looking at him?
He just reminded me, he was physically pretty much the same as what I looked like. And there wasn't anything like, you know, remarkable particularly or anything, you know. I had black hair at the time. Honest. Glasses at the time. Tall, kind of gangly, you know, kind of skinny and gangly and awkward and, you know, coming into your teenage years. But this boy was much the same, but I couldn't look at him. And I didn't know him. He wasn't someone I knew or a family friend or anything like that. He was just someone who lived a few houses up, a stranger to me. But I didn't like him. So, you know, naturally, you kind of already see what I didn't like was myself at that age. What I didn't like was being reminded of how and who I was or whatever. So, I mean, that now, just in a nutshell, that little thing, oh, I can't even look at him, you know. All right, why? You know, that's something to bring to therapy and go, I want to look at this. Like, I want, you know, it's upsetting me.
Yeah.
You know. And even now that level of like, oh, you should bring that to therapy. I think I just even happened to mention it in passing or something to my therapist. I wasn't even aware of what I was saying. And she was like, oh, let's stay with that. You know, kind of very
I can see it
lovely.
in her head, like,
yeah,
next 3-4 weeks.
Absolutely. She could see a piece of work that needed to be done. And equally now, I can see pieces of work from my clients, you know, that need to be, like the client who goes, no, I'm not doing that child thing. You can go, but we will, no doubt, in time. Yeah. And it will be lovely and it'll work, you know.
And they'll be happy at the end because they'll
100%.
get to meet and integrate the part that they rejected in some level.
Precisely. Because you see, if you take my example, and let's say if I had brought that into my therapist and she went, right, well then you have to go and talk to him and you have to, you know, kind of confront it. You'd be like, oh, goodness, no. So you don't do it that way. You do it gently and you do it really slowly and
safely.
Safely, precisely, yeah. So, you know, with that in mind then, like with my clients now, you might bring up a piece, you know, well, they'll just say something, they'll lead you to it, you know, and you go, tell me about that. Like, what age are we talking? Or even, if they haven't mentioned their childhood, they might say, oh, my boss, you know, is in meetings, they give out to me or they shout at me or whatever. And you might say something like, what age does that make you feel? Like, what does it bring, you know, or they might say it themselves. They might go, they make me feel like a child.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like I was back in school.
I'm being patronized.
I'm being talked down to.
Yeah.
Like, I might as well be, you know, what are they going to do? Give me lines. And they give you these clues as to, and you go, oh, what age are you talking? And then all of a sudden their younger self is in the room. And my therapist that I had at the time did this lovely thing where, and believe me, I'm saying lovely, the first time it happened, I was like, I do not want to do this, you know. It's kind of like, just if your younger self was here with us now, what would he be doing? Would he look at you? Would he look at me? Would he be interested in what's happening in the room? Would he be frightened would he be, And it just, I've had experiences with clients where their little selves came into the room happy and skipping, or came into the room frightened and, but we're there. And then all of a sudden after a while, you have this relationship with their little self via them. And sometimes their little self will go, make sure you tell him that next week. Make sure he knows. Tell him. And they'll come in and go, I just have this memory that keeps coming up. Yeah. And it just won't go away. And I need, but it's that younger self who goes, he'll listen. An incredible experience for that, as though you are reaching into the past and saying, I hear you.
And carrying that with you then back, that somebody was there in that maybe slightly altered memory that somebody did hear me.
Precisely. Yeah. And an understanding and a coming to feel that their little self was worth listening to and worth the time. And that might be the first time as an adult, 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever, might be the first time that their younger self was ever validated and attended to in that way.
Yeah.
And it, like any child, it is a transformative thing. It's nourishing. How could you thrive without that?
Mm-hmm.
So, and people, sometimes clients too will go, oh, but how do you even do that? Like, so it happened in the past. What would we even do? And again, you're right. It did happen in the past. We're not time traveling.
Yeah.
But I might say, okay, well, let's say if your little self was outside the door and we know they're upset, what would we do? We wouldn't sit here talking about it. Nor would we bring them in and go, now, come on now.
Cop on.
Yeah. Grow up. But people do talk to their little self like that. And almost, without fail, at least so far, the client has had an instinctive and natural reaction. Well, I go and comfort them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't talk. I just hug them and just pick them up. And you go, exactly. And that's how we're going to do this piece of work. It's not necessary to kind of, interrogate them or tell them, come on now, what have you got to be crying about, etc.
I find it very similar to what you were saying, that most of the time it's not the intellectual piece. What would you say to them, even though they can obviously speak to the younger self, but it's more like what they have done for them. They became present, or they became engaged with them, or they picked them up and they, rocked them or something, depending on how old the child is.
Absolutely. And there's a piece too about it where you can visit this work at any age. I have a particular client whose 28-year-old self benefited from this kind of intervention, this kind of relationship building. Because quite often people will, like I did, absolutely I did, I was judging my 12 or 13-year-old self for being who I was, simply for being too tall, too gangly, too nerdy, too quiet, or not enough this, not enough that, not enough, And it's only, and you take that in and it feels so familiar, so natural that you don't question it. So then those things become, I am, whatever it might be. And those are never good things. They're never like, oh, I am great. It's always something difficult and uncomfortable. So you judge your little self, or you might, your client might say to you, "Oh, sure, do you know, I was always whining. I was always, even now, like I find myself whining to my husband. Whining. God, what a word to use.
It almost speaks of lack of attention and love in some way.
Absolutely.
But they would have the connotation of it. I was doing some weird thing I shouldn't have been doing. I was
Sure.
whining.
Yes,
Who
exactly.
likes somebody who's whining?
Yes, because they've been told.
Yeah.
Why are you whining? Who likes somebody
Stop
who's whining?
whining.
Stop whining.
Yeah.
But yet, if an animal was whining, you'd probably go and attend to it.
Look
Do you
at
know
it.
what I mean?
Why, what's wrong? Can I help you?
Precisely.
Can I, yeah.
Do you know? But yet, for our little, or even, if their daughter, if their own husband, if their sister, whoever was, they wouldn't go, stop whining.
No.
They'd often meet them where they're at or whatever,
Yeah.
but they cannot do that to themselves. So that's when we step in, and they bring it to therapy and build that relationship.
It looks like you like this type of work, and that you get maybe some enjoyment from helping people this way.
I think that, like I think it's an understatement. Like if I were to say, I like this work and I get enjoyment out of it, that doesn't even touch how I feel about it, honestly. Like there's a piece of this, too, where in training and certainly now, and even now as I talk about it, I can kind of feel some sense of this thing where after a good day or a good hour or a good, kind of whatever it might be, client session, client meeting, you can walk home, walk to your car on a cloud. Mm-hmm. You're full of something.
How would you describe it? For me, it's meaning. For me, it's purpose. For me, it's the idea of help somebody in that special way.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm probably going to get emotional when I talk about this next piece because I find it hard to talk about it without, but it's something like this. It's something akin to this. I often go to Sligo to visit my family, and I was walking from the town out to where I grew up, and my phone was in my pocket, so I didn't hear it ringing. And it happened to be one of my nephews. He was little at the time, and he had called me to ask me if I wanted to come out to their house to play with them. Something very simple, that's so straightforward. But there was something about his little voice and his little reaching out to me. This was 9 years ago or so, maybe 8 years ago. And it filled me up, and I could feel it now.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe, but ultimately, at the very core, the very heart of it, it's love. And when a client has some kind of transformative experience in the chair, or a healing, or a breakthrough, or even if they don't, and they're just sitting with something painful, it fills you up with this feeling. It is meaning. It is purpose. It is a healing. This unlimited healing. Their healing is yours. Mm. Their journey is part of yours. You're there. You know what I mean? There's no cap on this. We're not bottling something and giving it to them. They're taking it home with them. It's everywhere. And I'm aware, as I speak about that it sounds spiritual and mystical and things like that. And it's not those things. It's spiritual, I guess. But it's not, as I say, mystical and like, whatever, I don't know. But do you know what I mean?
It's connection between two people.
It's 100% that, yeah.
Yeah. Who trust each other on some level, that this bond is possible to create and sustain.
But via vulnerability. We could talk for the next half an hour about, connecting in inverted commas via, social media. I actually, my skin crawls when I talk about these topics because it's so overdone. These topics are so over talked. But the opposite of that false connection online is this profoundly deep connection between two people. where they're leaning on us. They're vulnerable with us. And you can't find that.
I don't think you can have it anywhere else.
Precisely.
I don't know where
Precisely.
else.
Yeah. And I think, I'll often say in a previous role, I had a support piece with trainees and with new therapists and stuff like that. And I often used to say to them, which was said to me, we can only go so far with our clients as we've gone ourselves. That's not to say that to work with somebody who's been mugged, we must be mugged.
Yeah.
Not like that. It means this piece now that I'm working on, if I've done it, I can do it with you. If I haven't, I can't.
It's hard to navigate.
Well, it's kind of impossible because you're in the dark and you're like, oh, where are we? There's pieces of work I can't do yet or may never do that other therapists are doing. But I've experienced some of that. So I can facilitate it for another person. Do you know? And it's like, and again, I might have a client who has had an experience I can't have. Let's say someone a woman who's lost their child. Now, I won't have that experience, but I understand grief, pain, loss, family. So it's not necessary to absolutely, definitively have walked in her shoes in this case, but we're both human, we're both connected, we have enough connection that we can do that. Do you know?
Yeah.
It'd be a very limiting space if I could only work with Irish men of a certain age or whatever.
If you didn't have a breakup, how can you help me with my breakup?
Precisely. Or if I'm single and I work with married clients or whatever.
Yeah.
So, exactly. If I've never had a breakup or whatever.
Can I ask you, going back to your experience you described with the phone call from your nephew, is there any chance that part of you heard your own voice on the phone thinking, oh, mindless child is calling me if I want to play with them?
That's a lovely way of looking at it. I think, if we were to look at it via that, it'd be something along the lines of, because he at the time, let's say he's 5 or 6 or whatever age he was at the time, he understood his world on his terms. So while he knows I'm a grown-up, he wants to meet me on his level. He doesn't go, oh, let's have a business meeting and smoke cigars. He wasn't.
3:30, I'll send the invite,
Exactly. He's not meeting me at an adult level. He meets me there. So my part of me that is at his level meets him.
Yeah.
And we play or talk about what he wants to talk about or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't, talk about the adult world with him or play a board game or that's beyond him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He reached, so yes, absolutely. He reached out in part to me, his uncle, a grown up, but he reached out to someone he had already connected with. And that is, there's something lovely about that. There's something really
rare and rare, I would
absolutely,
say.
about that.
Yeah.
What a lovely thing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome. But equally too, that experience shows me what is possible, what I can potentially do. And then a client might be helped with a similar experience or with their own experience, or, if I guide them through something that they're going through, which is along the same lines, I'll be like, I'm comfortable with this. And, everything builds upon something else,
I think we have to be comfortable with the stuff we're working with the clients, because otherwise we get dysregulated, we get too afraid, too unsure.
Absolutely.
And there needs to be somebody in that dyad relationship who's grounded in what's going on. And most of the time it's going to be us, or should be us probably all the time.
100%. And I mean, during your training, those things I think will become signposted to you. Those, there'll be like these big neon signs going, look over here, A very simple example of that for me was with let's say second or third client, very early on anyway, in any case, he would tell me about his childhood school experiences, and specifically about being in the schoolyard and being bullied. And each time he would start one of these anecdotes, I would tense up in the chair, and my whole body would just go rigid, because whatever I was anticipating, now whatever the story was, it was never as bad as what I anticipated, but I anticipated the worst. So that's a big look at this in your training, learn from this piece. Those will come to you. They'll come to you now in your experienced work and your years of experience. You'll still get something like that eventually. You're never complete. But that's a very good example, I think, of something that if you follow it as a little
breadcrumbs
to follow, great learning there.
Yeah.
Great learning and great awareness builds upon it. Again, that idea of standing on everything that you've done before and everything other people have done before.
And you said you have 2 offices you're working from, Slane,
sure.
And also from Dublin, from Blanchardstown. Do you find different people attending each place? Because Slane would have maybe a few more farmers than Blanchardstown, I can imagine.
A lot of farming, presenting issues. Yeah, no. No, there is a difference, certainly. The particular client cohort I have in Dublin, the majority of them came with me to that place and have stayed with me since. The Slane, so I work in Dublin 2 days a week in Slane, in the village, in the heart of the village there, 1 day a week. And I mean, it's not as straightforward as city folk and country folk or something like that. No, I'm a blow-in. I'm from Sligo, so I am a culture, and I went to Dublin, but I'm a blow-in to Slane.
You culture from Sligo? I don't think Sligo would be considered culture, would it?
Pavel, anything outside of Dublin is culture.
Okay.
I'd say there's even
learning every day.
Just there you go, a little bit of psychoeducation, but 100% culture if you're outside, but so it's absolutely not, naturally not drawn along those lines, but there is a difference, and again, it's a little hard to define. Look, I suppose what I'm talking about really, when we kind of pull out and look at it at a macro level, there's something along the lines of urban environment, a heavily populated area, financial centre, urban centre, all those kinds of things. This is a societal level now,
Maybe also at the pace of life.
Precisely.
Even though Slane is just so close from Dublin anyway.
It is. It is close, but at the same time, it's a world apart. Do you know?
Tell me more.
When I'm at home and I open my windows, really all I can hear most of the time is birdsong.
And tractors?
No.
Okay. I've been to Slane many times, yeah.
Sure. When I hear a tractor, I'll let you know. But no, honestly, it's mostly, I'll probably start hearing tractors now. It is mostly birdsong. So very different pace of life. It's quiet. It's rural. It's calm. Listen to the language I'm using. Do you know what I mean? It's calm. It's away from this stuff. This bustle.
From M50.
And the M50 and do you know what I mean? Absolutely. Actually, a very different experience for me going from my home to the village, to the rooms there, than driving to Dublin to the rooms. Now, having said that, I've just realised as I'm speaking that I'm glad of the commute, because I can leave Dublin behind, quite literally and figuratively. I can leave it behind as I drive home, so I can decompress that bit. And the practice in Slane and the room, I rent a room there. It took a little while to establish and build. It has done. And in the same way that I work well with the older client cohort or medium to long term, it takes a while to find that, to establish it.
Yeah.
You might get a run of inquiries from younger clients. You might get a run of inquiries from people who are not quite yet ready. Referring back to our first episode, and one of the things that I think I've just reminded myself of is that when people enter into the course to study, it's when they're ready and not a moment before. And I've said that so many times to my clients, because they go, oh God, I wish I'd done this 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you go, you were different then. And I was different. If we could kind of hypothetically say, had I now, the counsellor now, met the client then, their younger self, it'd be very different. It wouldn't be this that we have now. So you stepped into my room when you were ready. And in many ways, when I was ready to receive you. And kind of often that sentiment, God, I wish I'd done this before. It's a little bit of a judgment of themselves.
For the other person, though, who you are not anymore.
100%. Yeah. Do you know, they're kind of going, oh, I regret that. But, they needn't, because now is now.
Yeah.
I like the kind of the structure of my week, the balance of it, the distance from Dublin to where I am. Quite early on, I made a decision to, funny enough, as I was saying earlier about my transference onto my therapist, where I want to buy their house and live in it. I don't want to see clients in my home. Explain that to me. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of, do you know? So, we can. That's a contradiction in ways. I value that in a therapist, but I don't feel I want to do that. So, probably worth looking at. But at the same time, I don't judge myself for that. I don't go, I'm a bad therapist. You know what I mean? Because I don't do that. I just go, oh, no, it's,
We all have boundaries somehow,
100%.
whether it's, you might see clients in my own house or...
The idea and the certainty of not wanting to facilitate my client work in my own home came to me when, the ground floor of my house is open plan. So when I come down my stairs, I can kind of see my, kitchen, dining room, entrance hallway and living room space, So I looked over at the living room and I thought, had I had a client there yesterday in the evening, I know that there would still be something there. There'd be something there energetically, or I'd look over and be reminded of it immediately. And you just think, that's a boundary.
That's a boundary.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
And equally too, I walk into my living room and naturally it reflects something of me, but I would have to look at it from the client's point of view. And then I'd see a picture of my family over here, and I'd see a picture of what my nephews drew for me, and I'd see a photograph of my little self over here, and I'd be like, oh, what would this be like for the client? Do you know?
And should I customize my home based on what the client might think or see?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Do you know, should I strip it of something? And why and for what? And do you know? And equally too, like if I'm working with a client who has something of a family dysfunction or loss or whatever, and then my family is up here, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what am I saying? I'm saying, not me, look at my family, like there's so much to think about, I think, in that setting up that planning of the space,
Having the experience you have, right, the course you've done and, multiple years since you've graduated, setting up your practice, what surprises you at this stage in the work you do? Is there anything where you go,
Good question.
Is it about maybe a research? You're looking at articles, podcasts, YouTube, or is it just literally with the client where you get surprised or excited about something?
I think, this answer is going to sound so contradictory, but stay with me, right? And I'll explain myself. As I was saying, when I entered into the course, and I had a notion of what it would be, and then it wasn't that.
Would you know what the notion was? Was it more like it's just talking, or like a...
I think more so the notion was that as I was then, as I walked through the door of the cottage for the first time, that's how I would be, but I would be a counsellor at the end of it. So
if
nothing
would,
changed
here.
Precisely.
Maybe just more here.
Nothing would change. I would just gain knowledge, skills. So I think the thing that surprises me and always will, and will always feel novel, is when something is revealed to me.
Revealed?
As in,
word?
As in, the person I was when I started the course, and I'm still the same person, naturally, but I just know myself so much better. So each time something else is revealed to me, so I know something else about myself via the work, it's a pleasant surprise. That's exciting.
So I'm hearing the journey of young growth with your clients.
Well, precisely.
Which happens inevitably.
It does.
To, I would say, most of us, all of us.
It has to.
Yeah.
If it isn't, something is stalling or blocking, or something is kind of holding you back. If it is, go with it.
So in that case, can you imagine yourself in 5 or 10 years? Who's that Neil? Do you have your own practice? Do you have your own room somewhere?
I'd like to.
I could.
Yeah.
A quick look at
the dream. The dream. Let's have a quick look at it. That dream really is, yes, to have my own established space. So what that means is, I suppose, not necessarily to buy a building and own it, but which is funny when you think about my transference piece about buying and living in, and but it does mean to have the space that is mine and not to be renting someone else's. Have a space that I can make my own. I can, kind of reflect me more. And I think the counsellors that I worked best with as a client were, again, that kind of older, more experienced cohort people, And I think in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, whatever it might be, I'm hoping at least that I'll have that similar wisdom when I finally get it. But do you know what I mean? Like this kind of experienced...
The maturity.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. What does it mean that I couldn't think of that word? But do you know what I mean? Like a groundedness, the whole lot. People say things all the time. Oh, I'm so much more comfortable in my own skin as I get older. And that's 100% true of me. If we think back to my piece about the 12-year-old me or the 12-year-old neighbour, how much more comfortable I am now with that and with him and with me and with that age, and so more of that, please, more of that all the time, you know what I mean? And the more of that I am, the more benefit it is to my clients. So then there's a cyclical thing of the more I will get out of the work and the more they will get from me, and keeps going all the time, never stops.
How do you feel thinking about it now?
Optimistic, excited for myself, hopeful for myself, happy for myself. I heard this thing again, a little speck of gold on the internet where everything else is dreck, There's 2 people in your life you have to impress. Your 80-year-old self and your 8-year-old self. And isn't that lovely?
You're 80 and you're 80.
8.
You're 8.
And 80.
8 and 80.
So
okay.
If my little 8-year-old self looked forward and saw me now, he'd be delighted. He'd be over the moon.
What would he say?
Oh, what would he say? Again, hard to put into words. And I was, I think, a little reserved at the time. So, it would be kind of more like this, kind of, oh.
He would be tutoring you.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Absolutely. He'd be like, wow. Kind of wanting to get there, wanting to go, oh, wow.
Wanting to be there with you, sharing it with you.
Yeah. And and then my 80-year-old self, hopefully, if I get there, look back and go, well done. Do you know? So, there's a kind of a good, this is the right direction for me. Great to be able to say that.
And I do have to ask, and we don't have to put this into the final edit. Is there a version of you doing a YouTube podcast, something?
That I would...
a version of you in the future that you would be doing a podcast or a YouTube channel, and your 80-year-old or your 8-year-old will still be saying, yeah, great, go for it.
Like be like an octogenarian YouTuber, like, don't forget to like, subscribe and follow, Yeah, I think it's an exciting thing. You see, there's a what's the right word? Like a trade-off or almost like a dissonance, like a disharmony between how intimate and private, confidential and personal the counselling space is, and how public, and how open, shared, and kind of boundaryless almost in a way online is.
Yeah.
So you have to, that's a line to tread so carefully. So you don't kind of arrive on YouTube and go, hey guys, this is what happened in my client sessions this week, and kind of share it with the world. But I do feel that there's ways to bring counselling to people. This included, this is wonderful, like that they can watch, whether it's trainees, other therapists, people thinking about becoming clients, people thinking about becoming therapists, they can watch and go, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, he's normal, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Patting myself on the back there.
He's a human being. I could talk to a human being.
Precisely. He's not going to sit there and look at me. He's not going to, judge me. He's not going to whatever. Absolutely, yeah. And, or I can say something that to me is cringy or embarrassing or whatever, and that's okay. Do you know?
It's me every single episode.
That's okay. But like, how many times have we said to clients, not in so many words, but I won't judge you. In effect, I refuse to judge you. So eventually that gets through. They can only continue to judge themselves for so long before it starts to peter out. And they kind of go, well,
because in the dyad, it's only them judging themselves.
Precisely.
You're not the one.
We're not agreeing.
You're just in there, well, I'm just noticing.
Yeah. Do you know? So eventually their judgment of self has no one else to cheer it on or to fuel it.
Yeah.
And it just runs out of breath.
Yeah.
What a lovely moment then for them to go, oh, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
I don't need that. Oh.
I want something else instead.
Precisely. Or I want to live a life free of it. Or, whether it's not immediately replaced by self-acceptance and self-worth and self-love, but how wonderful to leave it behind. How wonderful to go, I don't need to carry this.
Yeah.
That's somebody else's,
Yeah.
And you go, oh, I feel so free now or whatever. Liberated from it,
And can you imagine yourself talking about this online?
I think so.
Somehow?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's probably going to be niche, It's niche interest, but it's valuable. And it can be valuable and it can be, hopefully this will be valuable. Hopefully this will be in some way.
For somebody, I hope. That's why I want to do this.
Precisely.
I want to talk to therapists.
Yeah.
And I know in some way we talk in the same language, right? Kind of like using all the kind of jargon, right? Terms, but in some way, it's just two people talking about therapy, how therapy can be beneficial, nice, safe.
Yeah. And easy, not easy as in, well, that was a breeze, but
natural.
Not interrogative, natural, not having a light shined in your face and kind of, tell me what happened.
Tell me you love yourself.
Exactly.
Tell me you love yourself.
And you're failing if you don't, and you're, or if you conceal something or whatever. Not at all. It's this lovely, gentle thing. And clients too will say, I don't know when I started to feel that way, but I started to feel different. And I'll often say to them, you're here with me for the hour, and there's all the other hours in the week. And then you come back to me, and you're here again for another hour. There's all the other... And during this whole time, there's a lot happening in the back of your head.
True.
A lot of stuff shifting around and moving and coming in and out of conscious awareness. And that's what we're aiming for. And slowly, it happens. Another thing too, I suppose, for my... we're going to call it like future self for 5 or 10 year plan would be to be in and out of my own personal therapy. I don't think we ever get to a point where, I don't need any more therapy. I'm done. I've done it all. Not possible. So, no matter how much work you do, you'll never do it all. But that's, again, part of the human condition, part of what it means actually to be a person. You can't do it all. And realizing that can help clients to let go of a perfectionism, a striving to avoid failure, perceived failure.
But you also can't rush things up. So, when things come in developmental stages, maybe, like retirement or something, then you maybe have some more stuff to
100%.
deal with.
Absolutely.
Breakups, divorces, loss, very much
isolation, loneliness,
COVID,
having no clients, having too many clients, I do think too, that to all the supervisors out there, that a good supervisor will sometimes be a bit of a hybrid of therapist and supervisor, and will remember and understand always that the therapist themselves is themselves a vulnerable person and has the potential to be vulnerable,
and has weaknesses and has bad days
and need to be attended to and not just, right, here we are in a meeting, take the minutes, I think it's nice to have that in a supervisor when they look at you and see you and not your clients all standing behind you in a row waiting to be talked about or whatever.
How would you describe to somebody what supervision is and maybe what a good supervisor would do?
This is a good question. You're always asking good questions.
Thank you.
It's designed to not talk about the clients in a voyeuristic way, but to ensure that the therapist themselves is okay, is safe, and their clients are safe. That it's something you can, like therapy, you can go and absolutely be yourself and say, I made a mistake, or I'm ashamed of this thing that I did, or whatever.
I don't know what to do now.
Or I don't know what to do.
I'm struggling. I don't know what to do.
I feel blocked. I feel stuck. I feel not good enough. And much like a therapist too, look for the supervisor for you. Find them.
Keep them if they are good.
Keep them if you find them. Exactly. Yeah. Do you know? So supervision, is that chance to, without judgment, look at your work and be okay with it, all of it.
And I think for me, the main, almost like a shock, in that way, if I can put it, was learning that, let's say in states, right? Not all the states in states have mandatory supervision, but we do in Ireland. I can't imagine going for a long time without supervision.
Yeah.
It always kind of centers me back, being like, okay, that's what I do. It grounds me.
Well, absolutely. you'd kind of fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up, and then your head would explode.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because you can't talk
sustainable.
about your client work with anybody else.
No.
It's very, very confidential. And even with your supervisor, they don't know most of the stuff.
Absolutely not.
And they would not know any identifying features. But you want to bring it into some safe space where you can actually unpack yourself.
Well, absolutely, because they know not about your client, but about your work via you. So naturally, you're the one there in focus.
Yeah. I'm the one receiving service in that way because...
And support.
And support, yeah.
Help and guidance. Sometimes, direction. If you're kind of, I'd like to think that in the main, we don't do anything that's a bit off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? But equally, I'd like to think that a supervisor would say, Neil,
I think there may be like a bigger and smaller mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we make the small ones.
Sure.
Hopefully, we are literally there not to harm anybody. So hopefully we're not doing the big...
Absolutely, yeah. And that's to say too that during our training, there's plenty of preparation for that and, guidance around that. Too, I think it's worth remembering and it bears reminding ourselves that a perceived mistake, which can, let's say, for example, lead to the end of therapy for a particular client, can sometimes be about us, can sometimes be about them, their stuff, brought about this end, and nothing can be salvaged from it. Yeah. But that's maybe a pattern for them. So, we can, with a bit of experience, we come to this piece where, okay, that maybe wasn't so much about me.
Yeah.
That's not a, it's never about me. It's, that one wasn't.
Yeah.
And that can be a lovely moment too, as for a trainee or for even an experienced therapist who goes, yeah, I understand that. And again, a good supervisor can help you to see that when you go in and go, oh,
yeah,
I did this bad thing.
And also clients leave therapy for lots of different reasons. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't know.
Absolutely. And we sit with that and, because too, I think as in my previous nursing career now in this one, you can't save everybody. You can't heal everybody. You can't help everybody. Don't go in wishing to, and then you won't fail to do so, because you will fail to do so. You can't do that. So.
And I ask this question often, and I will keep asking it to different people. How are you ending your sessions?
So I think, going back to what I said earlier about, I will do the full 60 minutes, hour, then give myself the 15 or 30 minutes in between clients. So when you get to that point of, it's minute 59 seconds, and one party is looking at the clock, but the client is talking about something very important, or they're crying, or whatever it might be, and you're not just going to go, right?
Yeah, goodbye, off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So equally too, in thinking about this idea of how I end a session, and it could be because it's the hour, the 60 minutes, rather than, let's say, a 50-minute hour. But it's a much more intuitive amount of time in terms of your body clock. And I find now that clients, I've no doubt that they're equally picking up on something with me that I do, or something that I've, maybe even it is, I don't think they see me glance at the clock, because generally speaking, I do it in the moment when they're not looking at me. I mean, my closing is usually something along the lines of, so, okay, we're finished then for today. Or that brings us to the end for today. Something, something like that. And they know. They're never really, oh, is it? Or, oh, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's understood nearly. Do you know what I mean? And really
that sounds beautiful.
It's never abrupt or a shock or uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, so that's us for this evening. Mm-hmm. And it's, when and everything goes back to these kind of things. When I was a client, that's how I was treated, and there's no kind of
abruptness
and just, this is all you are to me. All you are to me is an hour for so many euro. If again in that moment, and it's 59.59, and the client talks for another minute or two, great. I fully understand the training and the need for the time boundary, and I will always say to clients, that's my time boundary to keep. It's not yours. If I decide we'll give it another 3 minutes until this piece is done, or 2 minutes, or whatever it might be, that's my time boundary to keep. Leave that with me. Do you know what I mean? So, but I do find that when I come to say that piece, the ending piece, the client is with it, with me. It's
ready, kind of like
precisely,
naturally finishing at that
precisely
time. Yeah.
And equally too, that's a piece about being long term. So they get used to me, they get used to the rhythm of the session, they get used to the feeling of that time passing. Do you know? And part of it's kind of maybe a body clock thing, and
some of it, like as therapists, also we kind of develop it. You have 60 minutes.
Precisely.
I have 50 minutes.
Yeah. And equally too, with clients, you might know with some of them, okay, by the time they get to what they're doing right now, it's probably been about 15 or 20 minutes. And you look at the clock and you're right. And then by the time they get to the piece where they're starting to do something different, we're probably now about 45 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's never going to be that precise or certainly not scheduled. But you feel this movement with the client in the hour. You feel the dance, so to speak. My supervisor has a question that he'll come to every now and then, which is, what is the dance between you and the client? And it is an interesting question and a kind of a good metaphor. So endings, ending the session like that it's a kind of a nice way to end that dance.
Now, what would be the nicest dance from me here right now?
I have no idea what that question means. What does it mean?
How would what would be the nicest way to end?
Oh, I see. You might say, well, I suppose.
When I say, Neil, we're up on time.
We've gone over time.
Same time next week. Yeah.
Absolutely. You might say, well, that brings us to the end.
Yeah.
I suppose if you think too about the language that we use, and that brings us to the end. Isn't that lovely? It's gentle. Like, do you know? It's wherever I got that from.
Well, before I let you go, especially for people who didn't watch your first episode, how can people find you? How can they start working with you?
Easiest way to find me would be to look up my business name. Fairly straightforward. Neil O'Connor Counselling. You'll find me on Google. You'll find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. So you get my number there, my email. Just reach out, see what my availability is, where I've got slots, where I've got time. So I'm in Slane in County Meath and the kind of Dublin 15, Blanchardstown area. Do you know? And absolutely. Reach out and, we'll see if there's a space there and...
Matching availability.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some work that we can do,
Thank you much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been really great.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
All right. Good stuff. Brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome.
The rest of my life is going to feel very mundane now after all this. Do you know?
Oh, no, it won't. Jesus. Hello. I'll try you.
Hello. Thank you very much for the cake.
Lovely. You're welcome.
Is there anything else? I'm kind of enjoying this. I don't really want it to end. Do you know what I mean?